Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel and thanks for being here. My name is Eric, this is Horus Works. I'm back with my lovely little Alfa GT today and I've got a bit of a different one for you. So what I usually do is I turn a spanner in these videos and work on them and have some fun. But today I thought I'd mix it up a bit, and what I mean by that is I bought this car a few weeks ago, and when I did, having not really owned a lot of these cars, I basically joined a bunch of groups, a bunch of social media groups, alpha groups as it were, and everybody's been so nice and so helpful with passing on information and tips that will help me keep this car on the road. What I thought I'd do is pay that forward, and what I mean by that is in this video I'm going to compile all the advice and info that I've been given so far, and hopefully that will help anyone who watches this video maintain these cars, or if you're looking to buy one of these cars, hopefully it will help you understand what to look for when you're going to buy one of these cars. Now, the other thing I did is a few days ago I took this car to an Alfa specialist, so a specialist garage here in Sydney that works on Alfa Romeos. They are called Frank's Pit Stop Motors, and they are one of the best, if not the best, Alfa repair shop here in Sydney. So I'm also going to pass on the information that they gave me about these cars. So with all of that combined, I've basically got a list here ready to go, and I'm going to go through it, and hopefully this video helps you out. And if you do find this video helpful, make sure you hit that like button so that I know that I've done this right. Alright, let's get started. Say what you will about their build quality or their reliability, the one thing you cannot deny is that Alfa Romeo make fantastic engines. So that's a natural place to start with this video. In my case, I'm going to go through the JTS engine because, well, that's what I've got. This is some of the information that I found in my research on what to look out for with these JTS engines. So the first thing is oil, and more specifically oil consumption. The JTS engines use quite a bit of it. They use a lot of oil. What I mean by that is that they burn a lot of oil during their combustion. So make sure you check your dipstick often and top the oil up frequently. Do not let it run low, because basically that is what kills these JTS engines, low oil. If the oil condition is unknown, swap the oil out as soon as you can, and if you can, run an engine oil flush. And Liqui Moly apparently make a great product that helps clean these engines quite well. As a lot of people online have said, oil is cheap, engines are not. So it's a little bit of cheap insurance to change the oil in these cars often and top them up to make sure that you don't get any engine wear. Particularly big end wear on these engines can be caused by low oil. So the oil to use. Well, the one thing that is directly recommended by Alfa Romeo, by the repair shop, the specialist that I took this car to, is Selena Racing Oil. If you use that brand and specification oil, you really have nothing to worry about because it is factory recommended. And what the Alfa specialist has told me, that this oil has been directly developed with Alfa Romeo and Petronas to contain additives that will protect this engine. Basically, the cylinder has liners in them, and the chemicals and lubricants that are in this oil are specifically made for this engine. So if you want the best, if you don't want to take any risks or shortcuts, Selena Racing is what you want. Now, having said that, a lot of people have recommended some alternatives to Selena Racing if you find it hard to get, or if your budget just doesn't stretch to it. So some of the other oils that work in this car include the Total 10 Watt 60 racing oil. The Motul 10 Watt 60 is also good. The 10 Watt 60 Liqui Moly oil is also good. And apparently the Shell Ultra Racing 10 Watt 60 is an equivalent to the Selena Racing oil, but it's quite a bit cheaper. Now, I particularly have not used these oils, but people who have offered me advice have recommended these oils, have said that they've used these oils for quite a while, years in some instances. So take this as some advice, but obviously try these at your own risk. This is what information I've been giving, and I'm passing it on to you. Now, moving on past the oil, the next thing to watch out for is the oil cap. Specifically, in the oil cap, there is a rubber gasket. Just watch that gasket that's in your oil cap. Now, the reason you need to watch that is because once that gasket softens, some of the oil can seep out from within the rocker cover and ooze down past on top of the rocker cover into your spark plug wells. Now, if oil accumulates in your spark plug wells, your spark plugs could get damaged, and also the rubber boots on your ignition coils could be damaged. So suddenly you might have a misfire if this oil leakage problem gets worse and worse. Easy enough to fix. Just keep an eye on your cap, and if you're noticing some oil wetness around your cap, consider replacing your cap with just the gasket within the cap itself. Now, these engines, as we've already established, consume quite a bit of oil, and if you're constantly taking the cap off and just filling it up once or twice, you may spill, and you might end up with some oil around the oil cap. So that could also be an indicator of why there is oil around your oil cap. But in any case, whether it's the gasket on the oil cap that's leaking or someone's accidentally misspilled the oil, be careful with these oil spills because they can end up in your spark plug wells, which can cause other problems. Okay, now speaking about filling up the engine with oil, one thing to take a note of is this engine and the cam cover is quite shallow, so you might find it hard to position an oil funnel into the cam cover because the cams are right there. This cam cover is quite shallow. One thing that works for me is I cut down a soft drink bottle so that the spout is nice and shallow, and that sits nicely on the rocker cover, and I can use that to put the engine oil into my engine. Some people don't do that. Some people don't use a funnel and then just pour it in, and sometimes they might miss, so you might get that oil residue on your cam cover. So the next thing about oil changes on this JTS engine is the oil filter itself. What I've been told is that these engines can take 2 different oil filters, and which one you need depends on what year your car was manufactured. Mine is a 2007 and it takes a shallow oil filter, but I am told that some of the earlier cars take a larger oil filter, and the difference really is dependent on where your exhaust is positioned on the engine. Mine is quite close to the oil filter, so they've manufactured a shallow oil filter for these JTS engines, but just keep that in mind. Yours might take a larger oil filter depending upon what year your JTS engine was made. And then one last thing about changing oil on these engines is the washer on the sump plug. Apparently the washer on these sump plugs is quite soft, and every time you tighten up the bolt on or the sump plug on the oil sump, that washer is basically, it's soft, so it squishes and conforms to the size and shape of the sump plug. So if you reuse that washer, the next time you refill the oil, you might develop an oil leak because there are indentations in the washer. Okay, moving on. So the other things to watch out for with these JTS engines are the lifters. They can be noisy, they can tick. Tick, 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 tick. Could be a stuck lifter, or it could also be the injectors, as the Alfa specialist has told me. Again, nothing to worry about if they're a little bit noisy. But the other thing that the ticking noise could be is the VVT solenoid, or the variator cam solenoid. Now that apparently can leak. There is a gasket around the variator cam solenoid that can leak, and it is on my car. It can also go bad, so it can basically fail, and it can cause this lifter, this ticking noise. So that could be a sign that you need to keep a close eye on this thing, and if you're noticing a massive drop in power during acceleration, or if you're just not liking how loud this thing is getting, it could be your variator cam solenoid, your VVT solenoid. And finally, the one thing that's really important to keep an eye on with these engines is the cam belt. Now, if you don't know when the cam belt was done, on purchase, immediately change your timing belt and change your water pump and your thermostat while you're in there. Apparently, when the cam belts go on these engines, a big damage, forget it. You might as well get a new engine. So it's really important to keep your scheduled maintenance on the timing belt on these engines up to speed. You don't want to leave it too long if it's due, because yeah, it can basically trash your engine. So all in all, the two big things to watch out for are your timing belt and the oil and the oil consumption. Make sure you use the right oil, keep on top of servicing, and these lovely little JTS engines are apparently great units, like all Alfa engines are. Alright, so next let's take a look at stuff in the interior. And before you step into the interior, you're gonna grab this door handle. And just to note about these door handles, they can snap, and it's got a lot to do with lubrication, them getting stuck and basically snapping, especially the plastic ones. Apparently these do come in plastic and metal versions. I don't know if they can both snap, but the plastic ones definitely. And the real easy way to stay on top of that is just to lubricate them. Lubricate the hinges front and back. Just give them a good douse of WD-40 or silicone lubricant to make sure that they move nice and freely, and hopefully that will stop them from being stuck and snapping on you. Now on the interior itself, one of the common issues with most of these later model noughties Alphas is the vinyl that they use, or the leather that they use inside the car. So unfortunately, the glue that Alfa has used to stick the fabric onto the foam on most of these door cards just wasn't up to the task. Over the years, the sun has done its damage and the glue has separated the fabric from the foam itself. So it can make for a really bad look. But apparently the fix is quite easy. You can go the cheap way and basically just tear it all off, use a glue remover to take off all the old glue, and then buy yourself a new glue adhesive and reattach everything. If you want it to look 100% perfect, the other thing you will probably need to do is get yourself new foam. But in either case, a little bit of elbow grease will get these looking pretty good again and should last you several years. Now the other big thing about these Alfa interiors is the soft touch paint. This was all the rage back in the noughties. Apparently some of the German cars use them as well, according to some of the Facebook group members who have mentioned that they've had Volkswagens who've got similar sticky residue problems. Now you can use some sort of glue remover to get these softened up, use a bristle brush to work it around, and a cloth to wipe it all down. Watch how aggressive you go with the remover, because apparently these plastics are painted black. They're not molded black, they are painted black. So if you use an aggressive remover, you could remove the black paint as well. And you don't want that. You just want that top soft touch paint removed so that sticky stuff is gone. Apparently you can buy that soft touch paint again. You can still buy it and reapply the coating. That's up to you, whether you want that nice feel back for a few years before it starts gumming up again, or whether you just want to leave it clean but be left with a shiny piece of plastic. That's completely up to you, but those are your options basically. Okay, the next thing are the windows. So just check that all the rubber seals on the windows seal properly, that the auto up and down works great, and also that your switches aren't broken and that the actuator is doing its job winding the window up and down. Apparently it's quite common for the auto feature to go out of sync, which you can reprogram. The other thing is those plastic buttons that pull your window up and down are quite fragile. Don't use a lot of force and they should last you. If you accidentally break one, you can't fix it. You'll need to buy a new window switch, or at least the buttons themselves. So keep an eye on that. Now the cables in the back of the seats that control the lean forward feature on these seats can snap. So be very careful that you don't snap these cables, because apparently they are a right pain to swap out. Apparently the space is quite tight in there, there's a lot of sharp metal in there, and you're bound to cut up your hands. So one thing I've found to try and maintain these cables in the best possible condition is I found that if I push the seat back a bit and I pull on the lever, I get no resistance whatsoever with the cable. But if I just pull on the lever itself, I can feel friction and I can feel that the cable is working quite hard. So what I've done from now on is I push the seat back ever so slightly and lift up, and I can feel that there is no pressure on the cable whatsoever. And hopefully that is going to extend the life of these cables as long as possible and stop them from snapping. Okay, next, just watch the plastics in the car generally. This is now, you know, it's going on 15, coming up, some of the early ones are coming up to 20 years old. So just watch the plastics in the car, especially if you live in a hot climate like I do here in Australia. No plastics are gonna last forever. The plastics in an Alfa Romeo are okay, they're not the best. So just keep that in mind, you know, general wear and tear around your plastics. So some of the plastic parts that can go include the buttons and switches, okay, especially on your window switches, the sun visor, lifting it up and down. Now the armrest lid can also snap, the plastic's in there, and the glove box handle as well, the chrome piece glove box handle. Now if you think about the items I've just mentioned, what are they? They are high wear, high use items. They are the things that you touch a lot. So they're the buttons on the windows, the latch on the glove box, the sun visor, the side mount lid. These are all items you touch a lot and that wear that quite quicker than some of the other parts in the car. So generally, I would say that the issue isn't with these parts themselves, it's the fact that you use them a lot, and it's got to do with the quality of the plastics that Alfa Romeo has used. Again, they're not terrible, they just use them a lot, and the car is coming up to 15, close to 20 years old, so they are bound to be a little bit brittle. So just watch those, because these are parts that tend to break on these cars, and as they're getting older and older, you might find it harder to find some replacements. Yeah, just look after your plastics basically. Okay, and the next thing that I found on my car is a loose gear lever knob. Now apparently these are pretty common on these cars, and some other Alphas of the same era as well, whether it be a 156 or a 147. So apparently the job is not a very easy one to fix. What you've got to do is climb under the car, and you'll need to drop the exhaust and the exhaust shield. Now the kit itself to replace it is not very expensive. It's about, you know, anywhere from $50 to $100, about £40. And what you're going to be doing is replacing the plastic assembly underneath the lever itself. So that part needs replacing, but the way to do it is to drop the exhaust. You're going to need to go under the car. And mine's got this problem, so stay tuned. At some point, I'll be making a how-to video about how to fix that in this car. Okay, so that pretty much takes care of most of the interior and the engine bay as well. So let's talk a little bit about the underside of the car itself. So one thing to look out for is your cooling system. Apparently it can develop leaks from various points, whether it be the thermostat or the water pump or the hoses. Just keep an eye on it, really important, because you don't want to overheat these JTS engines. I've actually noticed a couple of coolant spots. My coolant isn't dropping drastically, but the signs are there that something is amiss. So at some point, I'm going to do a little bit of archaeology and find out where that coolant's from. Keep on top of your coolant leaks, because these Alfa engines can overheat. Next is the engine mounts. So on these Alfa GTs, apparently all the engine mounts are prone to wear, and they do wear out quite often. So if you're noticing a lot of vibration in your cabin or a lot of back and forth rocking of your engine, it's going to be an engine mount, if not all of them. You're going to find 2 or 3 underneath, and you're going to find 1 above that secures the engine to the engine bay. So check all of those if you've got a lot of movement in your engine, and swap them out to avoid excessive vibration, which can lead to other problems. You know, it could lead to your hoses being moved more than they should, the vacuum lines as well. So pretty soon a water engine mount could lead to other problems. It could lead to vacuum leaks, it could lead to coolant leaks, it could lead to oil leaks, all sorts of leaks, refrigerant, you name it. Basically you don't want your engine moving around too much. On these Alphas, there are some specific areas to watch out for rust. The first one are the front subframes. These can rust out due to them being exposed to a lot of moisture. The next one are the sills, both around the sides and the rear of the car. You want to check for rust around there and get them rust proofed if you can. The other one, apparently there are some soundproofing bags in the rear seals, and if you encounter a lot of moisture and a lot of salt especially, you want to get rid of that soundproofing, because what it will do in the rear seals is it will trap the moisture and it will cause them to rust out. The other area that these can rust out in are the rear shocks. Now, apparently the rear shocks on these cars can be a ticking time bomb, because initially you will not be able to see any damage because they rust from the inside out. What happens is the water accumulates in the spring perch in the rear shocks, and it starts rusting inside and eventually works its way out. So at some point the springs on your rear suspension could just let go and basically hit your tires, and this is obviously very dangerous if you're on the road at the time, especially on a highway or somewhere where there's a lot of traffic. So keep an eye on them, and if your car has a few miles on it now, and if you live in a wet area, definitely get them checked out and swap them out as soon as possible. Now, speaking about the suspension, just watch your suspension on these Alfa GTs front and rear. The fronts especially take a lot of wear and tear. Apparently the front bushes wear out quite prematurely on these cars, and that can be within your wishbones, bottom and top. It can also be in your control arms. So if you're noticing any knocks or squeaks, it's most likely going to be some sort of bushing or suspension component. These cars are renowned to have bushing issues around their suspension, so just watch out for those. The final thing that was mentioned to me a couple of times are the rear calipers. Now, these rear calipers can seize over time, so just have them looked at if you're noticing squealing or squeaking as you're driving down the road. Apparently they're not very hard to put right, but it is something to keep an eye on, because it can get worse and worse, and before you know it, you're getting premature rear disc wear, and worst case, your rear wheels lock up and then you're stuck. So just watch out for any squeaks or noises in the rear brakes that could indicate that your rear brakes are starting to seize. Okay, so there you go guys, those are the tips and tricks I have for you today about these Alfa Romeo GTs. The one final note I'll make is that if you're noticing any leaks inside the cabin or inside your boot, just check all of the weld lines. These cars use seam sealer to basically seal up some of the weld areas where the body has been welded together, and over the years those may crack or wear out or basically just fray and break off, and these can cause leaks inside your cabin or inside your boot when the rain is quite heavy. So if you're having a leak inside your car and you're not quite sure where it's coming from, then check these seam join areas, because if your seam there is broken off or cracked, water can get into your cabin that way. But that's kind of it. So those are pretty much all the little tips and tricks that have come up during the last few weeks that I've joined these Alfa groups and have taken this car to an Alfa specialist. Now, I'm quite lucky. I've had a look at the service history of this car, and it appears that this car has been to this Alfa specialist before, and it has already had 2 timing belts, one quite a while ago and one just last year. So it appears that I bought a good one. It looks like this car has been well taken care of. Now, that doesn't mean that it is perfect, and by all means it isn't. I've got some things to take care of. I'm noticing a humming coming from the rear, so I think my rear wheel bearings are starting to go. Now, that's not specifically a problem to look out for with these cars, it's just rear wheel bearings. You know, this is a 15-year-old car. Rear wheel bearings will go on every car, and I think mine are just about done, but I'll keep an eye on it. If the noise gets worse, I'll be making a video about how to swap those out. The other thing is my gear lever is sloppy. I've got a little bit of knocking or rocking in my engine. My engine mounts may not be perfect. I've noticed a small coolant leak. So there will be a few more videos coming up about this car and my adventures with this little Alfa GT. So if you want to see that, make sure that you hit subscribe so that you'll be notified when those videos come out. Also, if you found this video helpful, please click the like button so that I know that I've done this right. and most importantly, I hope this video was helpful for you. I'm passing on the information that was given to me, and I hope it helps you out. And with that all said, enough chit chat from me. Thank you for being here. This is me signing out. I'll see you next time.